Hey, what's up, everybody? Another video. I'm trying to do a video, at least one video a day before I start my work. You know, I'm really not used to making videos for YouTube. You know, I'm underground, low-key, inconspicuous. What I really do, I'm a publisher. And I make magazines and books and whatnot, you know. And this right here is one of my favorite books, Enigma issue number 4, right? And the reason it's one of my favorites is because it deals with law, and it deals with politics, and it deals with history of civilizations, and how every civilization, every culture, every individual person also, they all have a code of conduct, a way in which they conduct themselves amongst each other, amongst their individual groups, amongst their family, even by their self, and then how they conduct themselves amongst other people that's not members of their particular group, their particular country, territory, whatever. And this is like a code of laws and statutes. It's like a constitution. A code is a set of laws in which the people of that institution, society, must conduct themselves. And if they don't conduct themselves according to these laws and statutes, they will be punished. They will be penalized. They will be fined. They might go to jail, you know. You got a law against murdering people, a law against stealing from people, a law against exploiting people. You know, you have laws against distributing resources to orphans if their parents die. The government, in many cases, is responsible for securing those resources, the land, the property, the money, until the child reaches a certain age, you know, and it's redistributed back to the child, like most civilized society conduct themselves like this, right? And then you have subcategories of people who have their own set of codes and ways and laws, mores, norms, you know, folk ways in which they conduct themselves amongst their particular organization, their particular group. And the reason I'm trying to talk about this right now, and I've been talking about this in every video, dealing with the minorities and the colored people, you know, dealing with the Jim Crow laws in America, the Nuremberg laws in Nazi Germany, the caste system in India, which determines that different classes of people have different laws relative to them, and some are beneath others. Some people have more privileges in society than others based on their caste. In India, you know, and in England, and certain European nations, also in certain African nations, really nations dealing with monarchies, they have a code dealing with the nobles, the elite, and the common peasants, you know. And they have different laws that actually apply to them individual people based on their caste, based on their class, based on their role and position in society, right? So in America, we have all of that combined in what we call the U.S. Code. The U.S. Code is a federal laws and statutes that deals with the laws passed by the Congress, and it's also deals with the executive orders ordained by the President of the United States. And the Supreme Court is responsible for enforcing these laws and interpreting, not enforcing, the president, the executive enforce, but the courts interpret these laws, you know. Then you got the individual states with their own constitution and their own compiled statutes, like Illinois compiled statutes. in which the courts of Illinois interpret those laws. But all of these laws somehow have to actually correspond with the Constitution, or it's considered unconstitutional, and it's considered a colored law, false law. But the reason I'm trying to talk about this is black people as an individual group, we don't really function as an individual group, because individual groups of people have their own set of codes in which they deal with members and non-members. You don't treat non-members the same way you treat members. Like in the Bible, you have the children of Israel, and you had the children of Israel was living amongst the Egyptians in the book of Exodus, really the book of Genesis into Exodus. Now, the Egyptians had their own set of laws in which everybody had to follow. But in these laws, the Egyptian citizen had more rights than the non-Egyptian citizen. And then you had the Israelites who had their own customs that they followed, which wasn't really powerful. They weren't powerful enough to impose these customs on amongst other people. They had ways they could, ate their food, dressed their food, how they intermarried with each other, like the laws that was given to them by Jacob and Abraham. They followed those laws, but it wasn't the dominant law of Egypt. But the Egyptians saw that the children of Israel was growing in power and in size, so they passed a law in which the firstborn child of the Israelites had to be killed, and they spared the women. The male child, the firstborn male child, had to be killed, and they spared the women. The girl child didn't have to be killed, I guess because the Egyptians saw that they could actually intermarry and use them for breeding purposes. But they passed the actual law to kill the boys. And Moses came about because his mother didn't want to kill him, so she just put him in the river, and he was found by the daughter of Pharaoh, the one who actually passed the laws, enforced the decree, to kill off the males. And they was destroyed for that. They was punished for that by the Most High, the God. Pharaoh thought he was God, but he had to be humbled. But the reason I'm bringing this up is they had different ways in which they conducted themselves, the Israelites. Even though they were subjected to the laws of Egypt, some of them didn't obey those laws that required them to self-destruct. Like Moses actually killed an Egyptian who he saw oppressing one of his people. So the black people in America, because we don't know who we are, we don't have a historical connection to our original people. We don't have a code, a unified code. You have a lot of different organizations with their different, cultures and ways in which they conduct themselves. You have the nations of gods, you have the conscious community, you have the Christians, the Muslims, the Nation of Islam. We had Marcus Garvey, the United Negro Improvement Association. We had SNCC. We had Martin Luther King's organization. We had a lot of different organizations, right? But they all had conflicting codes of conduct dealing with members and non-members, right? Some organizations like the Black Greeks, the NAACP, W.E.B. Du Bois, his whole idea was we should embrace non-members. We should integrate with non-members of our particular group of people. And the two dominant groups in America in the early 1900s was the Black Negro and the white Caucasian. Them was the two dominant groups. So the black people were actually still somewhat subjected to the Jim Crow laws, and we was tricked into being citizens in doing Reconstruction. We should have never allowed them to make us citizens, but they made us citizens by default because they wrote in the Constitution, basically laying claim to black people that because you was born in America, you're citizens. And because you're citizens, you're now subjected to the laws of the United States. And then they passed the Jim Crow laws, sharecropping laws, and enforced them upon us because they say we're citizens by default. And now everybody on earth, that's the 14th Amendment. Now everybody on earth, especially the people of color, are taking advantage of the 14th Amendment, which was created just to subject the black people into United States law. Like Kamala Harris, her parents were immigrants from Jamaica. And the reason, Jamaica has a massive Indian population and Asian population is because of the coolie trades, right? And I'm going to talk about the coolie trades because the coolie trades I discovered by reading the United States Code. In the United States Code, the coolie trade was abolished in the 1800s, but I'm going to talk about that later. But the reason I'm talking about the blacks who actually had conflicting ideologies in which to deal with non-members was primarily because we was divided. We wasn't really united as a people. You had the blacks who believed that we had talented tent people, the black Greeks who believed that only 10% of the black population was capable of ascension and elevation, and 90% should be destroyed or put to the side because there was no sense of trying to educate the 90%. Then we had the people like Booker T. Washington who believed in the 90%. They was black nationalists. People like Frederick Douglass, Marcus Garvey. They believed that the 90% had the same opportunity and capability to ascend just as well as anybody else on earth. They didn't just compare themselves to other blacks. They compared themselves on a worldwide scale. That they was not only equal to the so-called Caucasian, but in some aspects, because of our unique struggle as slaves and our ability to overcome, we was superior in a way because the other people didn't have the same experience of suffering and overcoming that we did. So we had conflicting opinions and methods in how we conducted ourselves with non-members, right? And we still see this to this very day. And it's actually even more divided than it was back then, because now the black people see each other as non-members because of their ideologies, because of their religions, because of their cities. You got blacks because they're not in the same city. They don't see themselves as the same people. They see the other person in the other city as a non-member. But the black people, to this very day, they do not treat actual non-members differently than members. Actually, a lot of black people, they treat non-members better than they do black people. Like where I live in Chicago. So the black people in Chicago, I'm not saying everybody, but a lot of them prefer to hire non-black people to do their carpentry, their masonry work, to do their landscaping, to do everything. Because for some reason they believe that non-black people or non-members are better, but they're not empowering their own group. Because when you give economics to non-members, those non-members give those to their own members. Those people don't conduct themselves the same way that we do when dealing with non-members. They see us as outsiders, enemies. They don't give us money. They don't trade with us. They don't deal with us on that level. But blacks, we don't really punish non-members. We punish members because we don't see each other as members of the same group. And in this book, I talk about the ancient Romans particularly because, they're, I guess, the most documented, dealing with how they had their society set up. And this is ancient Rome before Julius Caesar made himself an emperor. This when they just had the Senate, the law, And this was before they was conquered by the Vandals. The Vandals were the white supremacists, basically. But the Romans had a system in which they had 12 tables, which was the 12 laws that conducted, that ruled over the Roman Empire, right? And all members had to follow these laws. These laws were set up and hung up everywhere. But in this 12 tables, they had a situation in which non-members, barbarians, who enter into their Empire illegally was subjected to slavery. Any member of the Roman Empire had the right to enslave a non-member. Non-members were punished severely, but it was a way in which non-members could become members, right? They had to accept the law, they had to accept the ideology, and they had to pay taxes, because in the ancient Roman Empire, it wasn't a racial empire, because they believed that all human beings were either Romans or barbarians based on their ideology, right? And I read this in J.A. Rogers' book, Nature Knows No Color Line, when he talks about how there's so many black kings and queens in Europe. And it wasn't like he tried to, he talked about how when the Romans controlled Europe, they didn't really classify people based on their race. So it was a lot of different types of people in the Roman Empire, because they conquered a lot of the world. You had black emperors, you had Chinese, you had Arabs, you had all types of people. And the legacy of that continued after they was defeated, So that's why you see all these images of black people as in rulership positions in Europe. But that's what he wrote in his book, Nature Knows No Color Line. But now in America, the black people need to actually come with one unified code in which we determine who is the member, what is the criteria for being a member. Is it just being a blood? You just a member because we have the common ancestry, we came out of slavery, or we have the same skin tone, or we just people of color, and then do you have to pay dues? Do you have to prove your, loyalty to the group? And what do you do to non-members? How do you conduct yourself to non-members? Do you require non-members to pay more? Like in the Jewish community, and it's in their literature also, they have the right, this is in the Bible too, when they lend money to non-Jews, right, they could charge them interest, usury, but they're not allowed to charge each other interest when they lend each other money, interest free. That's in their code, But in Islam, it's against the Islamic law to charge anybody interest, which is usury. But America does it based on zip code, race, and demographics. A Caucasian, based on where the Caucasian live, the family the Caucasian has, the community, the credit score, whatever, they could determine to give you a low interest rate or zero interest rate, right? But the so-called black person, based on the zip code, based on the credit score, family, whatever, city, neighborhood, they get a higher interest rate. You can see the similarities right there. You go to get a car, you're going to pay 20% interest if you're a black man, right? 800 credit score because you live in a zip code, that zip code is seen as, because they go off the median income. Even though you might make 100,000, but if the average income in your neighborhood is 5,000 or whatever, $200, then they're gonna say they're gonna consider you being just $200 and you high risk, and they're gonna give you a crazy interest rate to set you up for failure. And that's with mortgages, auto loan, personal loan, whatever. And they do this based on their own code, the black codes, the Jim Crow laws. And a lot of us don't see it. And this is written in the United States Code, which is on the House of Representatives website. And so-called black people or people of color, and I'm gonna talk about the so-called Hispanics in particular, a lot of those people are not really Spaniards. In the mid 1800s, Great Britain had a policy to bring Chinese men, because they had to deal with the Emperor of China, and also the Indians, men and women, to the Western Hemisphere. They call this the coolie trades, right? And they shipped millions of Chinese and East Indian people to Middle America, South America. And a lot of these people that we call Latinos are really Chinese people, right? And they know they're Chinese people. But we don't know about the coolie trades. Watch this. Let me ask Google. All right, I gotta hook it up to the car. I'm gonna have Google reinforce the idea, right?